Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum and I'm here today at the Rock Island Auction Company taking a look at one of the cool guns that is in their upcoming September of 2019 premiere auction. This is, according to the receiver, a Norinco Type 313. What that really means is that this is the semi-auto civilian version of the Norinco Type 81 light machine gun. And there are very, very few of these in the United States, and despite the fact that China manufactured these things by the millions, both the rifle and the light machine gun, they're not very well known. So let's go into its history for a minute. First off, the Type 81 is not just a single firearm, it is a family of firearms. And it dates back to, well, basically the Sino-Soviet split. When China and the Soviet Union, kind of stopped being so friendly, the Chinese were manufacturing the AK, but they didn't have the data package for the stamped AKM. In addition, China had adopted the AK as more of a submachine gun than a rifle. Now, the Soviets did the same thing, but they ended up replacing all of their rifles with the AK. They adopted the AK as a submachine gun, played with it for a little while and went, wow, this is actually great for everybody, and got rid of the SKS. The Chinese didn't. The Chinese had maintained the SKS as a standard infantry rifle, supplemented by the AK in sort of a submachine gun role. And eventually, they decided that they really needed to replace the SKS. So they did actually develop a kind of hybrid AK-SKS rifle in the 1960s. That was the Type 63. But it wasn't all that successful. At some point, when I get my hands on one, I'll do a video on that and show it to you. But it really came to a head in 1979 with the Sino-Vietnamese War, which, if you're not familiar with, interesting piece of history to do some reading on. At that point, the Chinese realized that, wow, like our small arms selection is actually inferior to that of the Vietnamese army at this point. China, in fact, had one of the oldest, one of the most obsolescent small arms systems of any major military power. At that point, they were using the SKS rifle, still semi-auto, 10-round, stripper clip fed. They had AKs in a submachine gun role, and then they had RPDs as a light machine gun. The Russians had also gotten rid of the RPD, well, a couple decades earlier. The Chinese realized, okay, we really have to improve this. We have to get something new. And so in 1979, they started development of a new rifle. And this was led by an engineer by the name of, and I apologize for butchering this, Wang Zi Jun. And he was tasked with putting together a rifle, a firearm, that would be both a family of guns, so it could replace both the SKS and the RPD, and it needed to be primarily more accurate. That was their big problem with the AK, was it wasn't sufficiently accurate. So he went through and developed this. Now, this is the light machine gun version. It has a longer, heavier barrel, it has a bipod, uses a drum magazine, has a carry handle. There was also a standard rifle version of this, which has all the same basic mechanism, a little bit shorter barrel, actually has a grenade launching tube for rifle grenades, no carry handle, folding stock, that sort of configuration. So this is, again, kind of a hybrid AK-SKS. So let's go ahead and take a look at the internals and see how this thing actually works. All right, we've got a lot to go through here, so let's start quickly with some controls and markings. We have a safety selector on the side. This is semi in the front, and then it rotates around to safe at the rear. On the original military pattern of this rifle, it would have a third full auto position. I will discuss this a little bit later, but this is a Norinco model 313 in 7.62 by 39. There's our importer mark, Cheshire and Perez in Monrovia, California. The only other control of note here is the magazine release, which is very much AK-like. Just push forward, magazine comes out. It's a rock and lock style, just like the AK. The light machine gun version of the Type 81 used this 75-round drum. They also had 30-round magazines for the rifles. The magazines look externally very similar to the AK, however, they are not actually interchangeable. Drum works the same way. Load it up, wind it up, load it up, close it, wind it up, and you're good to go. We have a folding carry handle on the side of the gun here that has a little spring-loaded detent that will put it in one of three positions, either directly above the barrel, offset just slightly, or down and mostly out of the way. The Type 81 actually has an adjustable gas regulator. So it's currently set on position 1, which is standard. There is a 0, which is a gas cutoff. The rifles had this as well, and for the rifles, the gas cutoff is there for launching rifle grenades. And then there is a 2 position, which allows more gas through, and that's the fouled position. And then you'll notice that the adjuster here is actually set up to use the rim of a 7.62x39 cartridge as the tool for moving it. So that's cool. That's a nice utilization of, you don't need a special tool, just a cartridge. And if you don't have a cartridge, well, you don't really need to be adjusting the gas system anyway, do you? Out at the front, we have a very RPD-like bipod, fixed legs. The gun can pivot like this, but it cannot swivel side to side. You can fold this up by compressing the legs together, and then they lock under the barrel, like so. The front sight is going to give you a picture pretty standard from a Chinese AK, although it is put together a little bit differently. Fully hooded with a round post in there, and then to adjust it, you actually loosen this nut, and then the entire front sight assembly slides side to side on this dovetail block, and when you've got it in the right position, you tighten it back down. The rear sight, however, is quite a bit different than a regular AK. We have an adjustment knob here to go from 100 out to 3, 4, or 500 meters. We have kind of an odd rear aperture. This bottom notch is the one that you actually use for sighting, and the top gives you a little bit more visibility. There's an interesting legacy here from the Chinese use of the RPD in that this has very much an RPD-like buttstock, including the trap in the back. So if I open this up, we have 2 compartments. There is actually a cleaning brush stuck up in there, but it's going to be a little difficult to get to. And then we have a cleaning kit here. This is reminiscent of the RPD cleaning kit, but a little bit different. It's a plastic case. I suspect this may never have been actually removed, its contents removed. We've got a screwdriver for working on the gun, segmented bits of cleaning rod tip, I assume. Yeah, pin punch. That's a broken cartridge extractor. If you tear a case head off, this lets you pull that out. So you've got your whole little toolkit in the stock of the rifle, just like an RPD. All right, moving on to the construction and disassembly. We have a stamped sheet metal receiver with front and rear trunnions riveted in place. Sheet metal is a little heavier than your typical AKM. We have a ribbed top cover. It looks relatively Dragunov-like. Bolt handle. This is going to work, just like you would expect. There is a button at the back. Push that in, and the top cover comes off. That's just, very much AK-like tooling, but a different design of the part. We then have a spring and retainer. Again, fairly AK-like, except we don't have a joint. Well, we don't have, in the AK, it was a 2-piece guide rod in there. This is a telescoping guide rod instead. So there's still some wobble in it right here where the 2 parts come together, but a little bit different design than the AK. And of course, the rear lug is completely different. Now that that's out, we can pull our bolt carrier out. Note that this is a short stroke. There we go. This is a short stroke gas piston system, so we don't have a gas piston directly attached to the bolt carrier. We can pull our bolt out. Very much an AK style of bolt. More like an SKS style of carrier, however. Looking down inside the receiver, we have a fire control group that is pretty reminiscent of the AK. Not exactly the same, but it is hammer fired. You've got a hammer right there, a lug, a pair of sears, a front sear and a rear sear to ensure proper semi-auto operation. There's your rear trunnion with the stock attachment. The first 40,000 of these that were made as rifles were made with wood stocks. I believe all the light machine guns had wood stocks. And then the vast majority of rifles actually had side folding stocks. The front trunnion is rather AK-like, as it kind of has to be given the design of the bolt. We do have the ejector right there. Not a whole lot else to show you except this guy. That is a magazine hold open. On the Type 81 magazine follower, there's a little tab that will push this up when the magazine is empty, and that stops the bolt from going forward. There is no manual bolt release. Instead, you put in a loaded magazine or no magazine and give the bolt handle a little pull to the rear. That allows the hold open tab to drop down under spring tension, and then the bolt will go home. The gas system is located under the handguard, and the handguard is held in place by, actually, the rear sight tab. So we have these round protrusions just inside there. You can see facing upward right now, there is a flat side. In order to remove the handguard, we need that flat side to be forward to allow this to come out. To do that, we actually take this, the left side adjustment, pull it out away from the gun, and then it can rotate in, and then the handguard lifts out, and then it just lifts right off. So pretty basic stamped sheet metal cover here, wooden handguard on it, very much like an AK or SKS handguard, although unlike the AK, this handguard doesn't come off because this isn't a tube. And then underneath we have the short stroke gas piston. The gas piston actually looks very much like an AK gas piston, distinguishing it from some of the other short stroke systems out there like the FAL, where the piston head is more like the same diameter as the length of the piston itself. We also have, of course, its return spring right here. When you fire the rifle, this gas piston is going to push back through the rear sight block, and it's going to be pushing on the bolt. You can see that mark right there, where the gas piston hits the bolt, pushes it rearward, and that's what causes the rifle to cycle. So there you go. There is your disassembled Norinco 313, aka Type 81 light machine gun. So the goals of development of this rifle were in fact met. The requirement was that this had to be able to place, now this is the rifle, not the light machine gun. The rifle had to be able to place 50% of its hits at 100 meters within a 1.78 inch circle. And that's kind of a weird unit, weird standard of accuracy for us in the US. We're used to measuring entire group size. This was more of a statistical thing, and doesn't translate well into just kind of a plain simple minute of angle measurement. But suffice to say, the design was successful. Also managed to utilize some of the same standard tooling, or based on the same tooling as previous designs, which made it a little more economical to manufacture. Ultimately, millions of these would be produced starting in 1986, really. It was designated Type 81 when the design was submitted. It then went into trials and troop trials. It was first actually deployed in combat in 1984 in the Second Sino-Vietnamese War, where it performed pretty well. By 1986, it was put into full-scale production, the whole family, both the rifle and the machine gun version, and would be the standard standard Chinese rifle until the adoption of the 5.8 by 42 millimeter cartridge. Now, when they were designing this, they knew that the 5.8 was coming, but it wasn't ready yet. And rather than try to rush production on that, rather than stick with SKS's for another 10 or 15 years, the Chinese military decided to develop deliberately an interim rifle. So that was the Type 81 here. Now, a very small number of these came into the United States in the late 1980s, before the assault weapons import ban. That was in the light machine gun version that was designated the Norinco Model 313. There were a handful of these, a handful of standard rifles. What's interesting is today there's actually a version of this being imported into Canada because it has a different set of import restrictions than the United States. So they're kind of cheap and readily available up there, where they're kind of unicorns down here in the United States. In addition to use by the Chinese military, these were also sold to a number of smaller countries, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Algeria, Burma, Sri Lanka, all bought Type 81s in some reasonable quantity. So it's an interesting rifle in that it's way more common on the world stage than we normally have visibility of here in the United States. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you want to get more about Rock Island, check out their YouTube channel and Instagram page linked down in the description below. Thanks for watching.